talk a bit about Red Bull. Are they going for the Drivers' Championship or the Constructors' Championship? Because when you've got two teammates taking points off of each other and you have, papaya rules or, no team orders or whatever, however you want to describe it, um, you know, you have to have, and this again, we talk about, sort of biological things. A lot of what happens in a Formula One team is down to the management. If you actually looked at the skills of the, maybe the individual drivers, the individual engineers, and everyone else involved in the team, they haven't, no, none of them got superheroes. In their team, but if you have a manager that gets the best out of these people, then you get a better result there as a team. And, a lot of these teams need to go into a season with a plan. We're going to get one of our drivers to the Drivers' Championship. We're going to get the team to Constructors, or we're going to try and get both somehow. And then, at some point, you have to start making quite difficult calls, which are going to upset, one of the drivers, certainly, but, huge amounts of fans at the same time, in making rather, horrible calls about, what we're going to do to get to our end goal. And that extends to, as we've sort of said before, that how much aero testing, how much budget. You're looking at 2026, you're looking at your damage budget, your development budget. There's lots of things for the teams to juggle this year, probably more so than I think we've seen in many years, because we've got such a competitive environment. It's going to be a season where I think we're going to get a lot of big headlines and a lot of very angry people out there, which is probably great for Drive to Survive and the next episode of Lucky. I think this is going to be a season a lot of people probably will remember quite well.
It's phenomenal. The way McLaren are progressing, it's like a kid is growing up and the clothes are getting too tight, and suddenly they've got to pick and choose. What do we do? Do we go for new clothes? Do we just, we've got to figure it out. It's going to be a tough year for relationships, I feel. Yes. And that's something that Red Bull are banking upon a lot, because they've let go of Sergio Perez and gotten Liam Lawson, because they believe that A, Liam will bring in some fresh air, and B, he'll be tougher and better at managing relationships with Red Bull in the tough times than Yuki Tsunoda, which is A, a big call, but B, that also leaves them with a very unproven, let's say partly unproven driver lineup. Let's put it that way, because with Yuki also there was lots of hope, but we don't really know if he's going to be good. And that's a challenge that Red Bull are working towards. And to make that better, it seems that they're trying to make their ride much more easier, which is something that they've been complaining about the last year. And then now it's a new opportunity for this Newey less Red Bull racing to prove how good they are. And there's been a bit of back and forth about that as well. I find it phenomenal. Adrian Newey coming to the media and saying that I felt that they were not prepared enough, that they were not next in line, and something alluding to that stuff. And now Red Bull respond. And everything we've seen so far, I find it weird, Craig, is just shots of Red Bull racing being a tough car to drive and the car being spun out and nothing really more about it. And it makes me wonder, well, what's going on over here? Because clearly it's Max and Red Bull. You can't ignore them. But it's so hard to decipher where they are with the similarities of the car and everything that's going around.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the problems they had last year, the fact that they still won that Drivers' Championship, it kind of, it defies logic at some points. You had such an advantage, and then they just, Miami again, it just disappeared from view for a while. They had a difficult car. They had a car that was clearly been developed in a wrong direction. There are some other things which people are denying that changed on that car around Miami to do with something that really made it handle very well, particularly for Verstappen. Through the year they had all these other internal issues again, didn't they? Everyone was leaving, everyone was angry, everyone was going to get fired. Somehow Perez stayed onto his seat, and then at the end of the year he was gone. There's a lot to recover from, and they're probably one of the harder teams to predict, as you say. So, let's go through it. First of all, the car is looking still a little bit tricky to drive. The car, everyone said, looks exactly the same as last year's, and I think that is a fair assumption. I posted a comparison immediately. I wasn't absolutely immediately convinced that was the RB21 when they released some pictures. There's a lot more to come on that car. They understood quite late last year where their errors were. So you wonder, did they have maybe an RB20 continuation as the early season package, very much like McLaren have done in recent years, and then planning, the true RB21 update They've knocked some of the problems out of that car and some of the odd things that were added to it last year. Um, and they've also changed fundamentally how they do the cooling for the turbochargers at the back of the car, which is really interesting. And again, they've gone their own way, which is quite, again, interesting. But the way they've played about with their turbo intercoolers actually looks like it's quite a cheap solution. Where everyone else is using 3D printed intercoolers, they've actually got, big handmade ones in the side pods. So it's like, are they thinking about budget this early? They didn't get the Constructors' Championship. They got a bit more wind tunnel time than McLaren, which again is another one of those factors that you need to kind of account for through the year. I think that car in Max's hands certainly will be fast enough for poles and for wins. How that develops through the year is going to be something, we just have to wait and see. The Lawson question is going to be a massive one. Again, what are the management doing? How are they planning the season? Are they saying to Liam, look, we're expecting Max to leave at the end of the year. You be number 2 this year, and you're in the hot seat for next year. Which for me is probably the reason they didn't choose Yuki. I think Yuki, if they were looking for a 1 year, maybe 2 year backup driver for Verstappen, I think Yuki would have been more in the mold that we've seen, where it's very much a 1 and a 2 driver. And again, I think a lot of fans don't like that. But equally, I think, well, if I'm putting in, $150 million to run a team for a year, and I want the World Championship for the drivers, then I'm going to have a number 2 driver. I want the best driver in the number 1 seat. And, to get to my goal, that's the compromise we make. And that's a valid way of going racing. And some people do like it, some don't. I don't think Yuki had that added shelf life, and he came on quite aggressively early, and I think he's kind of flattened out in his performance. I think he is a great driver. I don't think he's a great driver. He's not a future world championship or potentially even race winner. And I think they've chosen Liam, but Liam can be a hothead. And we saw that very much last year, particularly when he seemed to be next to Perez in races. And again, I don't think Red Bull are going to want that with him and Max. I think there's going to be, keep your distance very much between them two. There'll be days when I wouldn't be surprised if Liam got his maiden victory this year. I think he's certainly one of those 8 who can get a championship, not a championship win, a race win this year. But I think Red Bull, there's a lot of engineering to go into that car, and I think there's a lot of relationship fixing inside the team that needs sorting out. There's a lot of key people have come and gone, and that's always destabilizing for a team, particularly a successful team, because you kind of have a formula of how you work. And I think testing maybe has proven that out, that Red Bull haven't been that sort of super confident, let's just go out, put the big times in, put the long runs in, show the car's great. So yeah, big question mark over them for this year. I've got no doubt that they could take the Drivers' Championship. I think, we could end up with the same result as last year. But there's a lot of ifs along the way there, as it would be making a prediction for any of those teams.